Should the church be poor? Now, I don't mean spiritually poor. I mean poor, beggar, poor. Those are some of the questions that we're going to be addressing today. We're very happy to have two bishops joining us today. Who better to talk to us about this than two bishops that come from two of the poorest dioceses in our country in Canada, Bishop Gary Gordon of Whitehorse and Archbishop Martin Currie of Newfoundland, and he's also Bishop of Grand Falls, Newfoundland. They will be with me shortly. I'm eager to hear their perspectives on this issue, but we begin with a very special perspective, one from Pope Benedict XVI.
In an interview with German author Peter Seewold for the book The Light of the World, Pope Benedict XVI answered a question regarding a statement that Pope Pius X made during the crisis of the Church in France about the Church separating herself from her goods in order to preserve her good. The Holy Father said, "This is a criterion that is always valid, and that we have to consult in every decision, especially also in the political decisions we make. But the point is not that we should carelessly throw away goods so long as they retain their ancillary character. The question is how long a thing really serves the whole. It should never be the case that we become subject to it, so that then the goods dominate the good, but rather the other way around."
Now, I find that very, very interesting. In fact, it reminds me of a story. I don't know if it's true, but they say that Pope John Paul II left one of his rings, or a ring, with a poor family in Brazil. Now, that family could have sold that ring, $500, $1,000, I don't know how much it was worth, and that could have fed them for a month, I don't know. But then after that, what? Maybe there's more value to that ring in keeping it. I don't know. I'm not saying that's not my perspective. I'm just putting that out. In fact, your perspective is the one that matters. Our two guests have more important things to say than I do. Bishop Gary Gordon from Whitehorse up in the Yukon, welcome, and Archbishop Martin Currie. He's the Archbishop of St. John's, Newfoundland, and also now the Bishop of Grand Falls, both dioceses in Newfoundland. Welcome. So we talk about mission dioceses, presumably mission dioceses because they're poor? Is that what that means?
We do not have enough resources to maintain the diocese, to carry out the mission of proclaiming the gospel.
Okay, so we're not talking about that you're not wealthy. You're talking about that you just don't even have the basic things to do the work that you need to do?
In order to carry out the mission, I mean, you have to have cars to travel around.
Right.
You need books. You need houses to live in.
Yeah.
You need halls to gather people. You need churches to gather people. So you have to have that infrastructure in order to proclaim the gospel.
And somebody has to pay for that.
Somebody has to pay for that.
So where does the money come from in your case, Bishop?
Well, the great gift of Catholic missions in Canada.
Yeah, of course.
CMIC provides 2/3 or more of the funding to keep many of the rural missions open.
So now, and you don't have enough people to generate, I'm going to say, wealth.
That's the big question. You know, a diocese which is just a little bit bigger than the size of France, with about 7,500 Catholics, 2/3 of them live in Whitehorse.
Right.
So the cathedral parish is self-sustaining. It keeps itself going. It has all of the things necessary for a parish, including paying staff and having youth ministers and so forth. But you get out into the missions where you've got 3 or 4, maybe a dozen practicing Catholics. Well, the ability for them to even pay for a tank of gas or a tank of oil to keep the place heated is just impossible.
Which you need up north. Would you say it's a similar challenges in Grand
Falls?
Falls?
It's a similar challenge in Grand Falls. We have more people, but we have like 30 parishes and 42 mission churches. Like there's 72 buildings altogether.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for traveling around and traveling. And also the history of Newfoundland. In '92, we took when the fishery collapsed in Newfoundland in '92, that was like the Carnegie falling down here. You know, 40,000 people were affected.
Right.
And a lot of out migration at that time. And also, there's no work in many of these outport places. There's no work. I mean, many families are working, 12, 15 weeks in fish plants.
Right.
So what has happened, many people had to leave. The diocese has decreased from 42,000 under 35,000 today. We're still trying to maintain everything with less work, with an unemployment rate perhaps 14-15% in the rural areas.
Yeah. Now, Bishop Gordon, you mentioned basic things like heating and gasoline for cars. Archbishop Currie, you mentioned the fact that there's a lot of people who are unemployed in your diocese. What are some other challenges that maybe some of the wealthier dioceses take for granted? Things like youth ministry, or like, do you find that it's possible to run the church like it runs in other places?
Another thing which happened in Newfoundland, of course, as you're all aware, in 1997, by a referendum, we lost the Catholic school system. So now we had to switch around altogether. How are we going to train catechists? How are we going to, educate the next generation in the faith? What Catholic Missions in Canada have very generous to us in supplying us with materials and supplying us with a salary for a catechist.
So what did you do?
So we have our catechist traveling around and trying to do a lot of education with the parents as well, to educate the parents, to educate their children, in a home-based catechetical method that we're using now.
Bishop Gordon, any challenges?
Unemployment faces us too.
Yeah.
The mission of the church is not going to stop just because people can't pay for it. That's not how we work.
Exactly.
We go to bring the good news of the gospel, and basically our staff, our pastoral staff, lives very, very frugally in very simple abodes. Livable, I mean central heating, vehicles that work. We don't want people to suffer inordinately, even like a benefits package for dental and so forth. These are all really
that's social justice.
It's social justice. So, I think poverty in a real way is when you are meeting your needs, but you're not living in an affluent way.
Okay,
And meeting your needs, say, in the far north, is quite a bit more than just meeting your needs, say, in Vancouver or Toronto, just because all of the infrastructure costs are so high.
Right.
Yeah, so are we wealthy? Are we rich? Well, of course we're rich. We've got wealth and people that are doing well compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But in terms of living in a Canadian society, there's a lot of poverty in the north.
Right. Would you let me ask you this? Would you say that poverty, for you as religious, as bishops, is that poverty a blessing in a way?
Here's the blessing. This is a great blessing. When I got to the diocese, it was virtually like there was nothing left. I didn't take a salary for the first year and a half I was up there. There was no money at all. So this is really poor. It's something I wasn't used to coming from Vancouver, where the salary scale for the priest was pretty good. We could go out and buy things. The blessing is that we don't have any debt either.
Yeah.
We don't have any big building projects. When you don't have a lot, you don't have a lot to lose. So you can risk a lot more. You are sort of liberated and freed from looking after a lot of assets. When you have a real simple operation, like in the north, it's got complexities, challenges, but it's
simpler.
It's simpler and it's sustainable, and it does give you the freedom and the liberty to concentrate more on the gospel.
Right. Let me read you a comment. This came in through our Facebook page from Anna Vargas from Vancouver, actually. She writes, I think that what people generally object to is a certain opulence that is reflected by some of its clergy, and that is on the onus of the individual, which reflects on the church as a whole. One must look at the question from a godly point of view. Jesus tells us that it is the love of money that is the root of evil. He also tells us to give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. This means that at every level of the church, we must rid ourselves of the idol of materialism while maintaining a good balance on keeping the necessary resources to build up God's kingdom. So I think that in a way that's very similar to what you've been saying. So it's the love of money or the...
Yeah. When I arrived in Grand Falls 10 years ago, my vicar general said to me, Bishop, you don't have anything which you could classify as a good parish or a wealthy parish, which is true. But, as Bishop Gordon has said, the priests and the people have a right to live in dignity, they have a right to have a decent house. They have a right to, you know, food. They have a right to education. These are basic human rights. And, and that's not being wealthy. That's just doing what is necessary for good health.
Yeah, yeah. So your needs are covered, so that you can do the work that you need to do. Do you think that do you have to take time away from the work that you should be, the pastoral work that you should be doing, because you're asking for money to do the work? Does that happen sometimes?
We try to ask the people to be as generous as they can, to give what they can. You know, like the widows' mite, we ask them to try to give what they can.
Yes. And
then where I say again, Catholic Missions in Canada, sort of supply where we can't make up, put food on the table and gas in the tanks. But the poverty is a different. When I was younger, I worked in Peru.
Yes.
And poverty there was real.
Yeah,
it was real.
Yeah.
People, you know, would died because of starvation. You know, people didn't know where they'd only buy enough food for a day at a time. It was a different reality living there than it is here. In Newfoundland, a lot of people, you know, can live, but cheaply. They have fish in their freezer and a bit of moose in their freezer and a few potatoes, and no, they live, cut their own wood, heat their own house. A lot of them they can live a lot more cheaply.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that this is a good place to take a break. But don't go anywhere. We're going to continue this conversation, and in particular, we are going to look at that age-old tradition of the church, which is to help the poor. So stay tuned.
Let us know your perspective. Email us at perspectives@saltandlighttv.org or reach us by mail. Perspectives at Salt and Light Television, 114 Richmond Street East, Toronto, Ontario, M5C 1P1. Or call us toll-free at 1-888-302-7181. Let your perspective be heard.
St. Francis Table has been in operation for 23 years. This week, the establishment served its 1 millionth meal. So what makes this place different from other ministries to the poor? Well, St. Francis Table is not a soup kitchen. It is a restaurant for the poor. The patrons pay $1, and then a 3-course meal is brought to them by volunteer servers.
In 2007, to wrap up our 20th anniversary year, Archbishop Thomas Collins was invited to come and bless the ministry and the site here. And during his homily, he made the statement that gospel ministry to the poor is essential for gospel salvation. And I think that should be written on every Catholic high school wall, at least around the Archdiocese.
I'm glad it's here. I've seen it for 20 years. I never thought about it to come and see it. I put that aside, and I like it. I like coming here. It's like it feels like a second home to me.
Now, the church has always, since the beginning of the church, been known for helping the poor. And I'm wondering, I know that recently in Newfoundland, the government initiated this poverty reduction strategy, and that they've consulted religious leaders, because presumably religious leaders have something to say about. What was that experience like for you?
It was positive to know that our government is making a real effort to reduce poverty.
Yeah.
They see people who are falling through the cracks, disabled, many people who, for lack of education and minimal jobs. You see and also how do you have a minimum wage that is a living wage when the minimum wage is not a living wage? So the government is looking at all these very realistically, and they're putting millions of dollars into trying to change the system so that poverty can be eliminated, basically.
So because Bishop Gordon was, we talked about social justice. So should the church be active in merely helping the poor, or should be active from a social justice point of view in eradicating?
Well, I think it's a both
poverty.
and. I mean, we've always been, as a church, we ask those hard questions. Yeah. Why are people poor? What's happening? Do they have housing? What can we do? So I think that's always been part of the prophetic voice of the church, is to bring those very difficult questions to government, to our own laity, to people in the church, asking those questions, because there are reasons, Is it because of alcohol addiction? Is it because of drug addiction?
Right.
What are some of the symptomatic things causing this poverty? It's important to find out why are people poor. It's also important to have the resources to take care of them when they are poor, when people are suffering, when they don't have a place to stay, when they haven't got a meal. And I think that the church, at least in the Diocese of Whitehorse and certainly in Vancouver where I came from, we're doing both in spades.
Yeah.
It's the way we are. I mean, because of the gospel, we ask the questions. Because of the gospel, we take care of people.
Respond, yeah.
And as Gary has been saying, to tell the old story about Archbishop Pedro Guevara.
Yes.
It says when he was
from Brazil,
in Rio de Janeiro, helping the poor and giving food and shelter and all these things and clothing, they used to say he was a saint. When he began to ask the question why they're poor, they said he was a communist.
Yes, that's a great.
But I think it's both. If somebody's hungry, we give them food.
Yes.
But then we need to ask the question,
then
why? Why don't they have food? What are the causes? What are the reasons behind it?
Is it easier for the church to tend to the poor if the church itself is living that, I'm not going to say poverty, but maybe that simplicity? Jesus never said that it was bad to be rich, but sometimes people take that, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. They take that to mean that wealth is bad.
Well, no, you need wealth to take care of people.
That's right.
You need wealth even to develop the questions so that you can ask the questions in the right places. You need to be able to take care of business. I think, of course, what the Lord's really getting at is it's the love of money. It's when you've got possessions, and this is just almost built into our human fabric. When you've got possessions,
they possess you.
They possess you.
Yeah.
And you're not free. Poverty is an evangelical thing that people aspire to, and certainly if you can be liberated from your possession of your possessions, then you really can follow the gospel.
Right.
But without the possessions, you may not have the ability to take care of people.
Exactly.
It's like Canada. Canada's a wealthy country. Mm-hmm. We have the ability to take care of a huge amount of people suffering in Africa. Mm-hmm. Should all Canadians just decide to give up their jobs, go and have a patch of potatoes, live on potatoes, and live that way? Well, we wouldn't be able to help the people in Africa.
No, right.
So I think that really in the church what we've always had is people called to evangelical poverty. We've also had people called to good stewardship of their wealth to take care of people.
Yeah.
And it's a both and for us in the church.
And the church has always been there. In the history of the church, many places where they would go, they would build schools because you educate the people so they can become masters of their own destiny, if you will. They always build hospitals to care for the they build orphanages, they build hospitals to care for the poor of the poor many times, to care of the human needs, to put their resources behind that, to try to help people to be able to live a better life in good health.
And even some people that say that that the church is the largest property owner in the world. I don't know if that's true or not, but certainly a lot of that property that they own are hospitals and orphanages. And so let me read you a comment that I think fits in perfectly. This came from John Ortiz. Not sure where John is. He says, to be poor in spirit is being rich in humility, compassion, and openness to the differences in peoples. The church should be rich in love, poor in all that is worldly. And yet, the material wealth of the church is just the natural consequence of a rich heart full of creativity. And it kind of makes me think about, Jesus lived, Christmas is coming up. And what's the image we have is this poor family. They had to give birth in a cave or a stable. And what about Jesus' poverty that's an example for us?
But what did he do with the gifts that the kings brought him?
He put them in the bank?
I don't know. See, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, already, I mean, right at the very beginning of the nativity story, you've got the shepherds that come, and that's great.
Gold.
You know, God bless the shepherds. They show up and they leave, and then the next thing you know is the three kings arrive, and the three kings are bringing all these gifts. Well, what's he going to do with it? Well, you know, I bet you Joseph took it and invested it in it, and was able to buy a new workshop for himself. You know the. Like right off the bat, here's the King of Kings, born up in poverty, and right off the bat, he's trying to show a new way of relationship with God and a new way of relationship in the human family in terms of this poverty. But it's really the poverty entered into the human condition. The stable said it all. The stable said, look at you human beings, you guys are really poor. You don't even know how poor you are. You don't even know how destitute you are without God. And I'm only thinking, well, now what did he do with the wealth that he got from the three kings? It really doesn't have to do with the dollars and cents. It has to do with the attitude.
Yes.
And with what are we doing with the blessings that God has given us on this earth? How are we taking care of them for future generations?
Right.
How are we being good stewards? Like, the earth has got all of the gifts and the wealth that the world needs. Well, why is it that one group has most of it and most of the people have so little of it?
Yeah.
So, you know, the beauty of the church, like an organization like Caritas International, which Catholic Development and Peace is part of, how do we help people understand that we're brothers and sisters on planet Earth?
Yeah.
That the word mine has to be eliminated from our vocabulary.
Ours. You just made me think also, because we're completely out of time, but you made me think that the poverty is also trusting that if you're poor, someone will take care of you if you trust, because it makes us depend on God. We have to leave it there. The discussion might be ending here, but it continues on Facebook, facebook.saltandlighttv.org. We're going to leave with our last words, because we always leave the last word to the one who is the Word. So a portion of this Sunday's Gospel from Matthew chapter 24, verses 42 and 44, goes like this. Keep awake, therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But understand this, if the owner of the house has known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. Again, that's from Matthew 24, 42, 44. Let's start with Bishop Gordon.
Well, to be awake and to be joyful in our expectation of the Lord's return in glory. That's one of my ongoing themes for Advent as we approach Advent. And then the big challenge I put forward for the Advent season is, can you donate directly to the poor, dollar for dollar, everything you spend on your own Christmas? And I have put that out to congregations now for over 20 years. And every once in a while, a family will come back and they'll say, do you know how big a check we wrote to Development and Peace in Canada? How big a check we wrote to Mother Teresa's Sisters in Vancouver? This is what we spent on our Christmas. It's a real wake-up call, both for simplicity and for realizing what we have.
Yeah. Archbishop Currie?
We live in a very uncertain world. In the Grand Falls area this year, many people's lives were terribly disrupted by Igor. They were cut off for time. Had to depend totally on others for their survival and the military to come in. The mill in Grand Falls, which supplied everything, all of a sudden was gone. We live in a very uncertain world. Therefore, we need to put some trust in God. If we try to depend on the world around us, it's constantly changing. We need to put our faith in God that He will be there for us. And we'll be ready to meet Him whenever He comes to meet us.
Yes. Well, thank you both. Thank you for your reflections. I'm sure that this will be a great food for people through Advent as they prepare for the coming of the King. I don't want to end, and again, we've mentioned Catholic missions in Canada, but I suppose it's important to really thank, these are poor dioceses They need your help. Go to the Catholic Missions in Canada website, cmic.info, and find out how you can support some of our poor. There's 6 mission dioceses in Canada. They're very poor, and I think we should help them. Did I say? There's 6, right?
28. 28 dioceses received from Catholic Missions in Canada.
28?
28 of the 72.
I've been saying 6 for the
received
last
from the-
3 years.
Over 600 missionaries receive help from Catholic missions in Canada.
Well, there you go. So, and they need your help, and so please check out their website and help them out. Bishop Gary Gordon of Whitehorse up in the Yukon, he has a website, whitehorsediocese.org, and he writes a blog there. If you go to that website, you can check out his Northern Bishop blog, find out about his doings. And Archbishop Martin Currie, Archbishop of Newfoundland and Bishop of Grand Falls, thank you both for being with us. That's the end of our show today. Remember to check our website, saltandlighttv.org/perspectives. You can watch all our shows there on demand. And remember to comment on our question of the week, because we cannot do this show without your perspective. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you next week.